Sawadee Krap and welcome to another episode here for the Funky Pod Mindful Media and Communication. And today we're diving into, I'm analyzing a show. I haven't done this in quite a while. And I'm not just analyzing the show as to like what the show is, but actually also like how that show became a cultural icon, if you will, how that show became a mainstay, how that show became must see, must watch, must everything, and how a show on television and the internet combines, bridges, merges cultures, brings people together. I'm talking about the best show there is, there was, there ever will be inside the NBA. I'm very happy that I can talk about the show because this show for me is one of the best shows out there in sports, but also just in entertainment, life, if you will. It's a great show. And when it comes to sports and entertainment, if you try to juggle that, I think Inside the NBA is the gold standard. And right now, CBS, the Champions League coverage of CBS Sports, Golazzo Network but only the Champions League crew, to be honest. The others, not even sure if they know what soccer, oh my God, that's football people, how football works. But the Champions League crew is fantastic. Kate Abdo, Thierry Henry, Jimmy Gallagher, and Micah is okay too. But Inside the NBA is the gold standard when it comes to sports coverage / entertainment analysis, all those things combined. And yeah, so I think Inside the NBA is, and if you're a basketball fan, you probably know it. If you're not a basketball fan, stick around because it's not just about basketball. This show is about much, much more than just basketball. It's not just a show about basketball and analyzing NBA games. It's an evolution that needs to be started. How it started from, of course, an NBA show, and then morphed into this cultural phenomenon that it is by now. And one of the core features of Inside the NBA obviously is how it blends humor, analysis, and like real talk. Yeah, they have segments where there's some real talk in there, which is great, and it merges it all together, and it sets it apart from other sports programming. And while they reference other sports programming sometimes, and they are all friends or they at least know each other, Inside the NBA is completely different to First Take from Stephen A. Smith, for example. Completely different to like the more analytical part, like Tim Legler, for example. Completely different to what Kendrick Perkins is doing wherever he's on, or Richard Jefferson even, right? So it's very, very different, and it's hard to say, but what it is, it has something that people gravitate to. And if you're a fan, you know. If not, let me quickly explain what happened this past year. So Inside the NBA aired, but still airs on TNT. So TNT had the rights for certain NBA games. So then the Inside the NBA crew, which is Shaquille O'Neal, Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith as former basketball players, Ernie Johnson as the professional broadcaster. So they would then go on the air 2 or 3 times a week, analyze those games that TNT had secured. Okay, right now this was supposed to be the last year for TNT because the NBA sold the rights now to Amazon. Huge uproar in the old traditional media world, also in the new media world, in the internet. We want to keep Inside the NBA. How can you not keep the best show on television? So there was a huge uproar, people rallying behind Inside the NBA, people like you and me, but also lots of celebrities, lots of basketball players, former players. Everybody said Inside the NBA has to stay, not just because of the basketball coverage, but also because, and I'm speaking very fast because I'm so much into that, because I too supported it, also because of the cultural impact that Inside the NBA had and still has. And now this week, it came out that Inside the NBA will stay. Not in the form it was, or it has been around until now, but TNT will keep producing it, and it will air on ESPN, which also still has NBA rights as far as I understood, which is great. So the team can effectively stay together. Sorry, Charles, you can't retire just yet. So Um, Before I analyze it, right, and I just said in the intro that Inside the NBA was like one of the or is more one of the more impactful, most impactful shows maybe even on TV, and it's not just because of the analysis, but also the real talk. So, for example, when some of the shootings, mass shootings, happen in the U.S., right, they talk about it. I remember one time that Charles actually walking off the air, Charles Barkley being like, I can't do a show like this right now with America being like that. And he walked off. And everybody was like, okay, we understand. We understand where you come from. You're making this point. Fair enough. So they're impacting society in terms of like making people talk about stuff. Not just basketball, about real stuff, which cannot be understated, especially in America. So that's just how big of a show, how big of an impact it has. And the show's been around since, and I had to look this up, since 1989. What? Pardon me. One of the segments is EJ's Nido Stat of the Night, and that's how the jingle goes. Ernie Johnson's Stat of the Night, and it's not sponsored by anyone. And then always Ernie Johnson says unsullied by sponsorship since, and Shaquille O'Neal goes 1989, and then he says thanks Dr. O'Neal. So since 1989 is Ernie Johnson around with Inside the NBA. Crazy. Charles Barkley, and I also again had to look this up, joined in 2000 when it then shifted, bringing like unscripted and I want to say also sometimes controversial takes to the show that boosted the popularity. So Charles Barkley with his outrageous ideas once in a while. Also some hilarious segments such as who he played for, where they make Charles Barkley guess who certain NBA players played for, and he barely ever gets it right. Then of course they have Kenny the Chet Smith, who's like more the analytical kind of guy, and then the most recent edition, which has also been years now since his retirement, Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq and Charles have great banter. They basically always disagree, and it's always hilarious. So it's a fantastic dynamic they have, and I hope it will last forever. So now let's start analyzing this whole thing, right? So one of the theories that we discussed 1,000 times on this podcast, the use and gratification theory, is just one of the go-to theories, when it comes to analyzing successful media, and it fits here perfectly, right? So viewers tune in not only for basketball insights. If it's only basketball insights, you could also watch, other analysts, right? They also tune in for comedy, relatable commentary, deeper insights, the arguments between Shaq, Kenny, Charles. Kenny has like this segment where he then turns around on his chair and sprints, runs. For those just listening, I'm only doing air quotes because Kenny, the Chet Smith, definitely not running anymore with those knees, but where he then limps to the board, to the video wall and explains something, which is also hilarious. So it's giving you, the audience, what you want. Do you want analysis? You get it. Do you want comedy? You get it. Do you want entertainment, insights? Whatever you're looking for, you get it. Use and gratification. Give the audience what they want. Also means keep the TNT crew together. Yeah, and some of the segments, they seemed also a bit more improvisational. For example, what I just mentioned, who he play for, right? When Charles doesn't know what kind of players they're going to show him, for example. Well, whenever they play a guessing game with Shaq already knows the answers, which is also hilarious because Charles is always wrong, Shaq is always right. Another running gag in the show. It's hilarious. And I mentioned earlier in the intro that I think Inside the NBA didn't only like impact sports coverage, it also impacts NBA culture, maybe even culture as a whole. And here we can look at, for example, also a theory that we call agenda setting theory. You also know that one. And when it comes to this, we can look at like instances where Inside the NBA shifted like public conversations. For example, Charles Barkley criticizes soft NBA teams a lot. And so his stance on soft teams and soft players, hail Joel Embiid, um, influences how those teams / those players are being viewed by the media and by fans. So then usually sound bites by Charles and Shaq are being picked up by other media outlets, being reposted, being added commentary added to them, or and so on, so that those are being amplified. More people talk about it, and they kind of impact the way we think, or at least what we think about. And that's attendance setting theory, right? Not just what we think, but actually what we think about. Okay. Another example would be Kenny Smith. As I said earlier, he might not be the most famous of those three former players, but I mean, he's a champion and he's the analytic guy, right? So his analysis during playoff season very often goes viral for whatever reason that might be. But it very often also sparks just some more debates, maybe even between like analysts, fans, social media, and the like, right? Or the All-Star Weekend, right? The show influenced the All-Star Weekend through segments just like the dunk contest analysis, for example. Yeah, where they did not hold back the last few years on analyzing the All-Star Weekend itself and criticizing the All-Star Weekend itself, and also analyzing and criticizing the dunk contest. When Shaq keeps on mentioning like that he hasn't seen anything like back in the day when Vince Carter was dunking, for example. I mean, exactly why not with standing, of course. It adds layers of commentary that resonate in post-game discussions, which then again leads to us talking about it at gender setting theory. But it's not enough to influence NBA culture by itself, right? It's also, of course, how you talk about LeBron James, and like just also the respect all the players have for this panel, and not only for the former players, also for Ernie Johnson, because he's been in the game since 1989. So players respect him immensely as well, which also leads to inside the NBA having lots of influence on NBA culture. Right, I remember last season sometimes they interview players after the game, right, via then satellite to sound like a boomer, and they had like a youngster from Memphis on there. What was his name? JJ something, right? And they're like, hey JJ, great game, and so on. And then all of a sudden you see his face freezing, going like, oh my God, because he realized he's talking to Shaquille O'Neal, right? And he's like, oh my God, Shaquille O'Neal, sir, great honor, sir. Something along those lines, paraphrasing, but he was really starstruck that Shaq is talking to him, and Shaq is like, yeah, young fella, great game, keep on working hard, and so on. So they have a huge impact on the current players because of the respect they all have. And yeah, we also had another example I remember actually watching when Charles Barkley again called out those so-called super teams, or question player traits, saying like, why you all need to be in super teams? You should be able to be what he called the bus driver, right? So if you want to be the superstar, you should be driving the bus, meaning in charge of your team, instead of joining the bus of another team. Yeah, back then it was the example of, it was hilarious, Kevin Durant joining the Golden State Warriors, which had Steph Curry, Klay Thompson already, Draymond Green, if you want to count him to one of the top players. I'm not discussing that right now. And he's like, Kevin Durant is not the bus driver. He's just sitting in the bus that Steph Curry is driving. And even Kevin Durant afterwards talked about it on social media with bus references and so on. And to this day, 10 years later or whatever, it's still a reference, right? So they have a huge influence on NBA culture, which is just crazy. Other cultural influence in just a second. I just want to finish the NBA segment because besides just the impact based on their respect they have from all their peers and current players and so on, it's of course also how they blend analysis with entertainment, what I just mentioned, right? So it is humor and insightful basketball analysis is something that you don't get anywhere else. And I mean, one of the most famous, most viral segments each week is of course Shaqting a Fool. It's Shaqting a Fool. It's Shaqting a Fool, right? Where Kenny does the voiceover, but Shaq presents the 4 most, do I say stupid on a podcast? Stupid/dumb plays of the week, right? Where they highlight funny player mistakes, which just humanizes players, which is great, and it entertains fans, right? So this is amazing. Then when teams, for example, it happens probably once every 2 or 3 weeks, when then teams have like a bad run and lose balls and so on. And then Shaq goes like, Kenny, cue the music, and Kenny goes like, it's amazing. It's just this great chemistry that they all have together, which then makes us fans laugh even more. It's fantastic. Or what I just said earlier, like when Kenny runs, in quotation marks, runs to the big board for like a breakdown of the plays, and then sometimes, of course, the other guys try to outsprint him. And a few years ago, it's still in the highlights, right? Shaq goes up to also outsprint Kenny to the board, and Kenny pushes him into the Christmas tree. And Shaq stumbles and falls into the Christmas tree. Amazing. And it's awesome. And all of this, you can actually also analyze through the lens, just so to I also do my job as a uni professor, through the lens of the cultivation theory. Yeah, fans who regularly watch it, so like me, we develop a perception of the NBA that intertwines like on-court performance with the off-court personalities that you see on the show, for example, that Shaq, Charles, and so on talk about, right? And when they talk about LeBron, we listen. We're like, oh, that's how LeBron actually is. Oh, okay, interesting. And that's kind of cool. All right, so that's just one of the other strengths that inside the NBA possesses, in my opinion. But now, I think I also want to talk a little bit about last, let's say, 10 minutes or so, about how inside the NBA doesn't only affect the NBA or basketball, but also culture and pop culture as a whole. And I suggest a theory that fits in here, which we call media convergence theory. Didn't talk about this too much on the podcast yet, so time to listen. So this just shows how, in this case, inside the NBA is just crossing over to other forms of media and creates content on other platforms, on other channels that are not just the TNT TV/YouTube channel. For example, I explain as we move on, right? So one of the segments they have inside the NBA is called Gone Fishing during the playoffs, okay? During the playoffs, when a team gets eliminated, they send them fishing, okay? And then they have like, usually they have Photoshop pictures where they have like a animated Photoshopped sea, Cancun usually, or like last year it was like that place in the US that they talked about. I forgot the name. Sorry, not American. Not sorry. And then they have like a yacht there, and then the fellas sitting in the studio with like fishing hats and fishing rods in their hands, and they have like edited pictures of the team that's just got eliminated in a very funny way behind them. It's hilarious, and usually the celebrities that support said team are also photoshopped in. It's fantastic, right? And that becomes then like meme material that's shared across different media channels. Those celebrities, singers, politicians, and so on share it, comment on it. It's a very, very, very funny way to combine not just the NBA and basketball, but also pop culture and bring it all together. Or Charles Barkley again, right here, you might see that he's my favorite on the panel just because he doesn't have a filter. It seems like he doesn't have a filter. And he made a statement once. He said like, I'm not a role model. Yeah, that's what he said from his playing days. But he also then, he restated it kinda. He tried to explain a little bit on the show, but the show will keep referencing it as well, of course, also to poke him a little bit here and there. But when they discuss athletes' responsibilities, they very often say he should be a role model, or as Charles said, he should not be a role model because there are no role models, for example, right? So they also talk about like things such as, should athletes be role models, for example, or should celebrities be role models? And with their strong stances on those topics, they then start further discussions within society, which I think, again, is very, very interesting. And while I say this, I also think that the framing theory that we discussed on the pod earlier a few times could also actually influence that a little bit. So, because of course, the crew frames certain players in certain lights, right? They celebrate underdogs, for example, calling out star players. Joel Embiid right now, deservedly so probably. Shaq's hatred, allegedly, for Dwight Howard and other centers who don't perform the way he thinks they should be performing, and so on. And that all shapes public narratives, of course, right? So inside the NBA is definitely a source that impacts public narratives regarding teams and players, officials, whatnot. And that leads me to then how those four guys all work together. Yeah, and the theory that I wanna introduce here is called reception theory. It's a very common theory in media studies. I don't think we had it here that often yet. The reception theory basically shows us how different, in this case, different segments relate to different hosts. Okay, so maybe Charles Barkley is the outspoken, the fearless guy, no filter. Shaq is the more comedic one and the larger life presence, like, I'm Shaquille O'Neal, are you not entertained? Are you? He's the one that gets the audience going. Kenny is like the analyst of those four at least, and Ernie, of course, the goat amongst all the broadcasters. He's the super mega respected anchor, the elevator Ernie Johnson, how they call him, that nobody can hold a candle to. No one would say something bad about Ernie Johnson, of course, right? So example here would then again be I want to say, and I explain even the camaraderie between Shaq and Chuck during like super playful arguments, like those inside jokes that they have. Shaq's constant reminders of his like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 championship rings, while Charles Barkley has no championship rings, of course. So Shaq was like, call me when you got some rings and so on. It's kind of funny / annoying. But we also have the social learning theory that applies here, because as a viewer, we mimic, of course, the host's direct approach in their discussion with friends, social media, and so on. And we also mimic, mimicking, it might be a strong word, but are influenced by their takes and maybe reiterate those takes. Or maybe our thoughts are influenced by their takes, and then their takes become our takes, if you get what I mean. Also, sometimes they have like hilarious BTS moments, like behind the scenes, like you can see in Inside the NBA After Dark episodes, for example, to show like their off-screen relationships when they're playing golf together. Ernie and Chuck, for example, do this a lot, which is just, again, adding to how we perceive them. We're like, oh, they're friends for real. Like, this is so cool. They actually mean what they say. They're not just acting it out in front of the camera. They're not just meeting there for those 2 hours or how many hours that might be for a game. They're actually real friends spending real time together, and what they do there is based on their real life. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Okay, last part is letting go, not taking part. No, that's the hardest part, not the last part. But the last part, I want to mention is also just that the show itself, and it's, I think, one of the most impressive things to me, doesn't shy away from taking a political stance or social stance. And it's not that they talk about like the presidential election or something. They know that that's nothing they should get involved in. But they do critically analyze certain happenings. And that's a theory we call critical discourse analysis, which means you look at like deeper meanings behind, for example, political and social statements. For example, while they didn't talk much about the election, usually Ernie Johnson actually had a kind of emotional response in 2016, where he discussed importance of hope and respect, and kind of like set the tone for Inside the NBA being a show where you can discuss serious topics as well as NBA related topics. Okay? Or Charles Barkley was said earlier, he walked off the set once. Yeah, so he's a consistent advocate for social justice. Yeah, he was very outspoken during the George Floyd protests, was like a strong supporter for the initial Black Lives Matter movement and so on. And even Shaq is usually on the side of like urging for unity, and he usually reflects a lot on community outreach, I want to say, especially when it comes to events such as like police and community relations. He's usually very outspoken and has like his own strong beliefs that he's not shy of sharing, which is good. You see, there are real people that really care about stuff, and they are able to discuss it. Even if they have different opinions, they're still friends, and they can still discuss it on the air without yelling or whatever, right? Which is great. So those political stances on the show created, like, of course, mixed responses from the audience. Some then praising the show, like me, for being authentic, others criticizing it for mixing sports with politics because shut up and dribble. And I'm very glad that Inside the NBA doesn't just shut up. This is, I think, very important, that they're not taking necessarily like, standards. They don't tell you vote this, vote that. They're just telling you think about it. and that's a good thing in my book. Now, I have just a few thoughts while we're wrapping this up. Um, I do worry a little bit about like the future for inside the NBA with the broadcasting rights. I mean, for this season, it seems to be like now secured, or the next season, but what's going to happen afterwards, right? Who's going to get the deals, the broadcasting rights, the rights to inside the NBA, and so on. Let's see. How long are the guys going to be able to do it? Ernie is not the youngest anymore. Neither is Chuck. So yeah, how long can we keep the guys around, and who's going to fill their shoes? Because to be honest, those other crews that discuss the NBA, while they are all like good at analyzing stuff, kinda, because they're mostly former players, they're not great with the chemistry, the entertainment part, and so on. I haven't actually seen the other inside crew yet. Are they still around? I don't even know. With Adam Lefko and stuff, like the B team from last season, I haven't seen them. I don't know. So yeah, that's tough. So what's next is the question, right? Also, Charles Barkley has been contemplating retirement like ever since I remember tuning into Inside the NBA. So let's hope that now that the rights are secured for at least one more season, let's hope Chuck is gonna stick around. Chuck, don't retire. We need you. Okay, we need you. On a personal level, while I wrap it up here, I think it's a great model. Inside the NBA is a great model for modern media, like how you can blend journalistic integrity into, that's a difficult word for German, integrity, entertainment, and even social commentary. You can blend it all together. They have a very candid format, and I think it could be a case study for changing the landscape of traditional media, but also how to get new media involved, because none of them is like a TikTok star or anything, right? But the inside crew is great on clipping content, of course, and this clipped content will appear on YouTube. It will appear like on House of Highlights, on Inside the NBA channel. It's on Bleacher Report, on Instagram and whatnot. So they're great at also doing utilizing transmedia storytelling techniques to actually get different platforms involved, different audiences from different platforms. It's really, really well done. So I think that it's a really good case to study, to see, hey, we have something that started on traditional media, traditional television, and it's transforming into something more while still being on TV too. It's great. It doesn't need to be one thing or the other, which is amazing. And the audience engagement is through the roof because everybody loves Inside the NBA, or at least has an opinion on it. And so the lessons for media professionals, in my opinion, are looking into like how to blend insights with relatability and humor. If you can mix all those things together, then the audience is going to listen to you. So that's why I think that Inside the NBA is like one of the most important shows on TV that shows us so many things in regards to how to do it, but also like how to impact, how to not hold back, how to be yourself, how to have a personality, and how to not be afraid of that, right? So I think that's a big learning that other outlets also should take into consideration. What we see right now is that, of course, mostly news shows are either on the way or on the side of being outlandish, just for the fact of being outlandish, or just for being outlandish, like the Logan and Jake Paul thing that they all started 10 years ago or whatever. Now everybody's on it. Or you're trying to play it super safe, not offending anyone, not talking about anything serious, just in case someone would be offended. So this, of course, is also annoying. So both extremes are annoying. We gotta take away from Inside the NBA. Just be authentic, be yourself. Don't fall into one of those extremes. And if you are confident in being yourself, the audience will relate to you. No. Even if you're hating on women from San Antonio, like Charles Barkley. All right. Hey, so I think that's enough of me fanboying over Inside the NBA, but I was really happy when I heard that they will stick around for I think at least one more season. I don't know for how many seasons they signed the deal, but it's great news. Now let me know what you think. Do you agree Inside the NBA better than CBS Sports Golazo or Champions League Crew? Do you think the Champions League Crew is better? Do you think there's another show that's better than Inside the NBA? What are your feelings about Inside the NBA? Are you team Chuck, team Shaq, team Kenny, or team... we all are team Ernie, of course, but are you team Shaq or team Shaq or Team Chuck. That's been 30 minutes of me fanboying over Inside the NBA. That's enough right now. Let me know what you think. In the comments, like, share, subscribe, you know the drill. Ideally, you also leave a review. That helps the podcast immensely. Thank you so much for this already. Until then, stay safe, take care, play D. We talk soon. Sawadee Krap.